Hi, everybody. I hope you're all staying safe and enjoying some of this beautiful weather. Nice summer. Summer's arrived. Yay! Anyway, I'm here at the church, as you can tell. Church. And I came in today to check out the amazing windows. So, want to see? Do you want to see them? I'll show you. Do you want to see the windows? Yeah. No, not going to see them. You got to stay tuned. Sunday, Barbara's video. You got to watch. You got to see. There's a talent show happening, so you got to check these windows out then. But there is something I want to show you. This is what I found. The windows are incredible. This is kind of neat. Ready? Can you see that? Popcorn, 3D glasses, and Gideon. No idea what this guy is up to. He must really miss us. I guess we'll have to see what else he's up to soon. Take care. Bye.
Hi guys.
Hi. Barbara and Kim had asked us to read a passage from Matthew 10:37-42. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me.
Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it.
Rewards.
Whoever welcomes you welcome me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me.
Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteousness. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you,
none of these will lose their reward. Bye.
Morning. Well, this passage this morning, thank you so much, Tiffany and Holly. It was a great job. This passage this morning is one of those that makes you sometimes wish that Jesus didn't say the things he said. I mean, what was he on about? In May, we celebrated Mother's Day. We honor our mothers, and we just finished celebrating Father's Day. We value our families so much. Sometimes it's why you get up in the morning. And so we wonder what Jesus is trying to say here. It troubles us a bit. So what is he on about in this passage? I need to start with a few things, and that's not to let Jesus off the hook, because he doesn't need that, but just so we understand what he was saying so long ago when he sent his 12 disciples out on this very dangerous mission. First of all, he wasn't telling his disciples, these disciples, to love their families less. He was actually telling them to love him more. He was warning them that the time would come when they would have to make some terrible choices. They would meet many dangers. They would have to confront people who would be trying to force them to make terrible choices. And certainly the early church martyrs, 200 years after Christ, found this, and their stories are chronicled in the stories of the martyrs. And after Jesus' crucifixion, 200 years after, as the movement, the Jesus movement, the way it was called, began to form and grow and develop, their followers did find themselves in exactly this bind, because when they would be arrested for being Christians, and that meant that you would die a horrible death in the arena with people cheering as beasts tore you apart or gladiators cut you with swords, your families would be pleading with you to recant. You don't have to do this. Think of your parents, think of your mother, think of your father, think of your children. And the choices were heartbreaking. And yet, again and again, these early followers chose to affirm that they were Christians, to refuse to deny that they were Christians. So in many ways, We have to understand that Jesus was talking to his disciples, to them, and not to us. And we say, does this apply to our time and our age? But of course, he is always talking to us, whatever our time and whatever our age. His words compel us to ask ourselves, how deep is our faith when the chips are down? How could we make such choices? We miss our church so much. We deeply miss our time of gathering together. It was great that some were able to be here on Friday. We miss the before church greetings and the hugs and the sense of being one body, of being together. We miss the after church good wishes and catching up on news. We miss that trip for lunch with our own friends that makes Sunday such a special thing. But we know that nothing is ever going to replace the physical presence of a church community. And we miss that. But COVID time might be just the time for each of us to explore this question. How deep is our faith when the chips are down and we have to make some hard choices? And this might just be the opportunity to reflect deeply as we putter in the garden or sit on the patio with iced tea or watch our children or grandchildren playing or get up in the morning and thumb through our Bible and reflect and pray, all to reflect on the meaning of our faith. This is a good time to do it because we can't go to church. So what does our faith now mean beyond hanging out with our faves, which we like to do? It's time to ask ourselves once more, who is this Jesus? We all love Jesus. We all love God. We all need God, especially when we're afraid or when we're grieving or when we're going through tough times or when we're discouraged. Especially when we feel alone. We so need God. And I'm sure that those of you who've gone through these many difficult health issues during this time when the precautions that were necessary meant this lonely walk into a hospital room or meant dropping your loved one off at the emergency room and having to go home and wait for the call. These are really hard things. We all seek and need and receive the comfort of God's Holy Spirit and the comfort of our community in times like this. We are so glad that we have that. And we all sing with great emotion and can sing, Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart. And we mean it. But sometimes there are times, and maybe there will be times for each of us as we go ahead, when we're being asked for more than we can give, for sacrifices that we feel we just can't make. And I have no glib answer for those times. But I do have a story. It's a story about the time that Julius Caesar, with his mighty Roman army, decided to invade the island of Great Britain, which existed then. And he brought the army there. It was nearly 60 years before Jesus was born. And of course, that invasion had to be by boats. And the Roman army arrived in those boats and approached the landing and the cliffs that protected the British island. Edward Margaret tells this story in a sermon called True Discipleship, Christ Brings Division. And I'm going to read what he said. He said, they were still in their boats. The Brits were on the highlands and high cliffs, looking straight down at the boats in the water. The Romans were looking up, and all the boats came in to land on the shore. And the Romans did one particular thing. Do you remember what they did in that classic story? The Romans burned their boats. There's no turning back. They were committed to the mission that was before them, and they were willing to die for that mission. There used to be a saying back in the 70s, if you were arrested for being a Christian, would there be evidence? These soldiers were willing to die for that mission. Now, Jesus was sending his 12 disciples out on a trial mission. He knew that after he left the earth, they would go out again and again and again on such missions. And he needed them to understand that their lives and their souls and all that they were depended on their understanding. And the understanding that once you set out, there can be no turning back for you. And so we urge them not to falter and not to fail, but to press on with every fiber of their being, even if it meant They had to oppose their own family members. Family or clan, realized in the Middle East, was a stronger social bond, much stronger social bond even than our nuclear family model. So Jesus was basically saying to them, if you are going to follow me, realize that you follow me no matter what. Each of us begins our journey of faith by accepting Christ as our Savior, and we love him. And we want to disciple and learn all that he was and is and ever will be, and how that impacts our lives and how we should live. But sooner or later, we begin to understand that we are to be committed not only to loving him, not only to being faithful to our own church that we attend and support and love, but to the mission of Christ through the church. The mission to seek and find those who are hungry for the bread of life that he offers. The mission to live in all things and among all people as the very love of Christ. The mission to work always for the merciful care and compassion that Jesus offers, not only to insiders, but to outsiders. Jesus told his neighbors in Nazareth, in the synagogue, remember that story in Luke we did last year. The first time he preached to them, he told them that the Spirit had anointed him to bring good news to the poor, release for the captives, sight for the blind. And then he went out and he lived it in everything he said and did. But remember, the good news for the poor may not feel like good news to those who have it all. They don't want to give that up. So even those high-sounding words that Jesus spoke, if you try to live them out, can get you in a whole mess of trouble. God knows, because his son lived it, that when you confront the powerful and the dysfunctional and the evil of this world in all their lies and all their deceptions, they don't say to you, okay, great, thanks for bringing this to my attention. They say, get that troublemaker out of here. Yet, we're called to be those troublemakers sometimes, because, back to the beginning, Jesus demands our absolute commitment. So absolute loyalty and commitment to Jesus. But are there any dangers here? Is there anything we need to be careful of? There are people and powers who would exploit this. So always remember, Christianity is not a cult. Beware of any leader who puts personal loyalty to him or her above the commands of Christ, who punishes anyone perceived to be disloyal, who manipulates and controls your relationship with your loved ones and your family and your friends, who tries to control those relationships or isolate you from them. God gave us families for a reason. God makes no mistakes. And the creation of the world was brilliant. And families are part of that creation, and we need our families. We need them to raise us up in our world, to set our feet on the ground, and to lift us up to the right spiritual and moral places. We need our families. And if you're a cult leader, one of the first things you're going to do is separate your members from their families or co-opt those families into your purposes. This is not that. Jesus is not that. Jesus is not leading his followers into a cult when he demands absolute loyalty. His desire for you, for us, is always that we should not be destroyed, but that we should be saved. For when God in Christ is truly glorified, you are not less than you are more than you are, and you are all that God calls you to be. You are not less yourself, but more yourself. So don't be afraid to commit to him. Over the centuries and up to the present day, there have been many religious cults, and I want to speak to them for a bit because it can be so dangerous. Religious cults that hatch like alien eggs in the nest of the church. I think about one of the most famous, preacher Jim Jones, who took an ordinary congregation not unlike ours at Kingston. It was, I think, the Disciples of Christ, which is very similar in polity to Baptist denominations, where each congregation has its own autonomy. And he persuaded them to move with him to Guyana. And there, as the ultimate conclusion to his control of them, he forced all of them to inject cyanide and to kill themselves and their children. 918 people died in Guyana that day. There have been other cults that have abused or killed or destroyed the bodies and souls of the people who followed and found themselves drawn into the web of a single charismatic leader, a counterfeit Messiah who intended to build around him a whole gathering, a crowd, a congregation that would satisfy his narcissistic needs. So how do you tell whom to follow and when? How do you know when to raise Cain and protest and when to settle down and listen? And I'm always torn by that. I think we all struggle with that question because we all want relationships. And I'm sure many of you have had the same issue sometimes. Something as simple as being at a party and someone tells a joke that demeans another person or another group. Do you laugh? Do you say something? Do you correct it? We all struggle with this. All I know is in a story that I found somewhere, and I'm sorry I can't give credit to the author because I can't remember where I found it, but the story is about a boy who wanted to learn about Jade. And so he went to study with a very talented and gentle old teacher. And the gentleman began the lesson by putting a piece of the precious stone into the boy's hands and telling him to hold it tight. And then he began to talk about other things, philosophy and the world, men and women and the sun and everything under it. And the session was over, and he sent the boy home about an hour later. And the next time that the boy came, he did exactly the same thing. And this was repeated for several weeks. And after a while, the boy began to get restless. When was he going to learn? He wanted his questions answered. When would he be told all the things he wanted to know about the jade? But he was too polite and just polite to question such a prestigious person as his honorable teacher. And then one day, the old man put a stone into his hands, and the boy cried out, "That's not jade." We need to practice holding the jade in our hands so that we can't be deceived by those who do not wish us well, or those who pretend to follow Jesus for their own profit or aggrandizement. When you hold the jade, when you're truly engaged in the mission of the church, you will follow those who search out the hungry to offer the bread of life Jesus offers, and you will do likewise. When you are truly engaged in the mission of the church, you will follow those who live in all things in love and all things and among people as the very love of Christ, and you will do likewise. When you are truly engaged in the mission of the church, you will follow those who work always for the merciful care and compassion Jesus offered to both insider and outsider, and you will do likewise. When you are truly engaged in the mission of the church and you see injustice and you see people oppressed and put down, you will speak out. In other words, when you follow Jesus and his disciples, when they do what Jesus said he had come to do, he told his neighbors the first time he preached to them that he had anointed them to bring good news to the poor, freedom to the oppressed, release for those in prison, and sight for the blind. Most of us we so hate conflict. We will do anything to avoid a fight. Our natural inclination, as they say, is to go along, to get along, which is how the world gets into great trouble. But sometimes we do choose relationship over issue, and we need to name our battles. Sometimes, our friends, our family, the circles in which we travel, sometimes we do choose not to die on a particular hill so that we can follow it up later or come at it another way or live to work another day. But there are other times, there are intersections of history or our lives which call us to remain true to Christ and to his message of compassion and freedom and justice for the oppressed and sight for the blind, and bread for the hungry, the mission. Sometimes we are called to keep engaged in the mission, to keep holding the jade. Let's all do that in this next very difficult time that we're going through at this point in history. Bless each one of you. Keep in touch, and I'll see you next week.